Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. I'm Pinky Webb. Today on the program, from controlling inflation to creating jobs and a pandemic exit plan, lawmakers look forward on how President Bongbong Marcos will tackle this in his first State of the Nation address. What should be the legislative priorities in the middle of an economic crisis? Albay Representative Joey Salceda joins us live. President Bongbong Marcos invites Filipinos to listen to his first State of the Nation address, where he will detail his plans and priorities in the next 6 years. Lawmakers are hoping to see a clear roadmap on how his administration will lift the country's economy amid the pandemic and other challenges. Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have Albay 2nd District Representative Joey Salceda. Congressman Salceda, welcome back to the source. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, good morning, Pinky. I'm sorry, I'm not on Zoom.
Yeah, this will do. Again, let's start with this, Kong Joey. Ano ho ba ang inaasahan ninyo? What are you expecting to hear from President Bongbong Marcos' first State of the Nation address?
Una-una talaga with his 62% mandate. Dapat he has to start with an articulation of a grand national ambition for the Philippines, of what kind of Philippines he will live 6 years from now under our Marcos administration. His father, after in 21 years, tried to create the vision of a great Malayan race or Malayan supremacy. For him, I think he has to redefine it with in a more technocratic sense, and then he can go down to the 5 major priorities, which is really fighting inflation. Second is making sure that there is food on the table, and that is our problems with agriculture. Third is the creation of jobs. 4, as you said, is an exit from the pandemic. And then, of course, fiscally, he is inheriting a debt that increased by almost 23 basis points, from 39% of GDP to 63.4% of GDP. And then lastly, number 6, I think, of course, the role of the government as an agent of positive change, the usual, and this is where, Duterte also came in, that part of creating a culture or a social cohesion. So those are the 5 big themes, basically.
Very important. That's a lot. But I want to first go back to what you said. What kind of Philippines to expect? What kind of Philippines should we expect from the Marcos administration?
Right now, the best that one could pick up from his inaugural, from his campaign speeches, because I went through all of it. I did content analysis. And his preliminary, of course, snippets, is basically to increase our economy by 8% per year, and reduce our debt to GDP from 63 to 52%, and reduce our deficit from 7.6% of GDP to about 3.4 to 4.2% of GDP. So far, that is the kind of Philippines, and that in a sense will reduce poverty from 21% to 9%. So that is the grand view, basically, and create a middle class of about 50 million Filipinos.
Yeah. The Kong Joey, of course, I know you're an expert on this, but those numbers can be complicated to the average Filipino. So there are a number of issues and topics that you have raised, which actually form part of the Pulse Asia survey on what Filipinos need or want from the Marcos administration. Number 1 was inflation, which is also the first one that you had mentioned during this interview.
Yes.
We are at 6.1%, and of course, let's make it more digestible and understandable. Kapag inflation po, syempre, rise in prices of basic commodities. Let's start with that. Ano ho
Ang
ba ang dapat nating asahang inflation on an average this year ending 2022?
this year talaga is a giveaway. Wala kang magawa. Andiyan ang Ukraine, Russia. At saka andyan po yung mga logistical na mga rigidities na iniwanan kasi kumbaga nagre-recover pala ng pandemic, tumigil yung mundo, so you're just getting shipping and all the other logistical parts to move. So ang inflation ngayon hindi yung bababa ng 5.5% this year. So next year the target we need it will take a big effort to transition to the usual 2 to 4% of GDP. I think may bababa lang ng 4%. I think next year is a practical and viable. Ang problema kasi itong inflation na to, number one, yung inflation kasi basis po yan ng benchmark for the number of poor people. Diba? Kasi kung magkano yung pagkain na minimum, so you would expect poverty to spike when inflation is like this. And second, ang ito rin po ang basis itong ating pong inflation, ito pong ng ating CPI is basically food. Ang problema sa food dahil yung matataas pong spike ay nandun sa meat, basically meat and fish, which is the basis of protein. So it has a big impact on learning, on stunting. So big issue. So I think you will expect basically the president in his own to address these issues because nagko-connect to sa education at saka sa poverty. So alam mo, pag tinignan mo ang buong mundo, ang lahat ng countries na mataas ang presyo ng chicken at saka ng beef, mababa ang score sa PISA. So I can show you a chart that essentially shows that. So I think he needs to address that very, very, very decisive.
Which was number 2 in the discussion in what you had told me a
Which is
while ago.
food.
Sabi mo nga inflation, opo, and food on the table. At again, of course, very important to the Filipino people because there's been a rise in the prices of food. Let's start with this, sir. Umpisahan na po natin ang rice issue
Ngayon,
sa...
siya nakaupo sa agriculture. So, ang importante dyan, ngayon, ang nagpapasipa niya ay sa kakulangan. Now, we're talking about production, not just prices. So, ang problema dyan ay wala pong fertilizer dahil napakamahal. Yung natitirang fertilizer natin nasa Morocco at saka sa Belarus na nasa gitna rin ng gyera. So,
Congressman Salceda.
dati po kasi,
I lost you for a bit there, sir.
Come again?
I lost you for a bit, maybe about 30 seconds. I missed a part of what you said.
Oh, well, basically, the main problem there is fertilizer.
Okay. Pero could we possibly first go to the issue on rice? Number one, we're looking at rice. I believe the lowest is about 37 pesos or 38 pesos per kilo. Again,
Opo.
it's a staple. Kailangan po natin ito. Unahin po kaya natin yan. What should be done to be able to, let's start with this, to be able to lower the price of rice?
Unang-una, aminin na natin na talagang kailangan natin mag-import ng 3.4 million metric tons of rice this year. So, ang goal mo niya next year is so magkaroon tayo ng level kung saan ang ating hindi na tayo pwede ng food self-reliance, magastos masyado yan. So I think we need to just increase production and residual na lang kung anong i-import. So ano bang kailangan para mataas po yung produksyon? Yung fertilizer kasi tumaas ng 196% sa buong mundo. So yun po ang nagpapataas ng yield. Kaya bagsak ang yield sa buong Pilipinas kasi nga hindi na afford ng mga local farmers ang fertilizer. So it needs to address fertilizer. I'm sure the word fertilizer would be in the SONA. And second, obviously, is irrigation. Importante po at least yung mga ang short term dyan kasi it takes time for you to build irrigation system. At least malinisan man lang yung mga kanal. I need, there will be some form of technocratic facility, technocratic content within that SONA to prove that he is really serious as being, the DA secretary, that he knows basically. Halimbawa, sa chicken, ang problema walang corn. Dahil yung corn, tumaas din by 60% globally. So kaya nga tayo nagkakaroon ng corn, and corn accounts for 60% of the cost of producing a chicken or a beef. So ang taas po tataas po ang presyo at kulang po ang production natin although may production tayo ng chicken, kaya nga wala po tayong chicken curry ngayon lagi nawawala kasi nga mga payat po ang mga chicken dahil ang taas po ng presyo ng corn. So I think he will have to go through all these commodities basically, but in one fell swoop, basically I think it all redounds to fertilizer and irrigation and farm to market roads.
And very important because you talked about that already, fertilizers and also farm to market roads. But Congressman, I just need to take a very short break. The Source will be right back.
Thank you.
You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our source today, Albay Representative Joey Salceda. Congressman, just a quick question on the rice tariffication law. Is it time to review or even possibly repeal this? Has it served its purpose, you think? Because there are calls for to actually repeal the rice tariffication law. What are your thoughts?
It's working actually kasi nakakabili tayo ng mura abroad. At hindi naman natin pwedeng pilitin dahil wala man tayong fertilizer dito at wala tayong Mekong River na siya nagbibigay ng irrigation. At saka ngayon, nakakakuha tayo ng 15 billion doon, kung saan yung 10 billion pinamimili po ng mga makinarya na pinamimigay po sa mga farmers na ang lupa ay less than 2 hectares. At yung sobra ay pinamimigay as para compensation for the loss of market share at ng market doon sa mga farmers na hindi makalaban doon po sa murang presyo po ng bigas. Kasi otherwise, sabi ko nga kanina, na kailangan mo na 3.4 million anyway. So, mas importante na yung taripa na nakukuha doon ngayon na 35%, yun po ay automatic na maibigay po doon sa mga rice farmers.
But do you think it's really going to the rice farmers as mandated by the law that a percentage of the tariff being collected goes to them?
Visually, yes. Kasi doon sa akin pong distrito at sa mga kalapit distrito ng Albay, lalo-lalo sa Bicol River Basin, nakikita ko rin naman yung pamimigay po ng mga inputs at saka ng mga machinery like thresher. In fact, ang magiging problema ko nga dyan sa rice tariffication law is it is labor displacing. So, ibig sabihin, halos lahat na may mechanized na from threshing, from harrowing, yung basically, the entire process now is from tilling to planting to threshing, they're all now mechanized. So, I think that there will be a agri-labor displacement. Ang pinaka-issue ko po dyan sa retail
rice tariffication. Well, what about emergency powers to control inflation?
Ay, kailangan po talaga niya yan. Kasi unang-una, kita mo naman kanina na parang bumigay na ho tayo pagdating sa produksyon. So kailangan po natin ng incentives to production at saka i-recapitalize po dahil lalong-lalo na yung mga SME, 63% ng dating labor force ay galing sa SME. Yun po ang winash out na kinatay ng pandemic. So nagkakaroon tayo ng mga supply rigidity. So the President should be enabled to provide loans or new capital to recapitalize these SMEs. And number two, kung may isang bagay na nakakapagpabuhay ng SME ay actually telecoms. Kasi pag tiningnan mo, noong 2020, yung labor force survey, ang nagkaroon ng 12.3 billion na mga resellers, bigla lumabas doon sa tinatawag natin na labor force survey, yung nag-measure ng unemployment. Ang ibig sabihin dyan, ang telecoms, kasi wala tayong national backbone ngayon, mabigyan ng power ang Presidente na madaliin na magkaroon tayo. O halimbawa, itong mga iniwanan ni Presidente Duterte na mga kalsada, mga tulay, kailangan matapos. So baka kailanganin po gamitin ng Air Forces para matapos ang tulay dito, ang mga kalsada doon. Kasi nga po, nasa loob po tayo ng transition. So I think at pangapad, kailangan po para puksain yung mga regional oligopsony. Kasi pag bumibili tayo ng bigas abroad, nasa 14 pesos lang yan. Pero ang benta dito, 38 din. So hindi naman nararamdaman ng tao. Pero at least may supply. Pero dapat, kasi nga, kontrolado ng mga cartel, dyan po mga regional o local cartel. So yun ang kailangan din po, mga price, market power, abuse of market power is very susceptible po sa Pilipinas. So dahil po ang pinakamalaking problema natin ay dahil yung inflation ay pumapasok na po sa tinapay, pumapasok po sa chicken, pumapasok po sa halos lahat ng commodities, kailangan po ng special powers po ng Presidente. In fact, yung aking pong proposal ay in-endorse na ni incoming Speaker sa economic managers for discussion, and hopefully it will be discussed in the SONA.
So maybe just you think what would be the kind of support in the House of Representatives on the proposal for emergency powers? Do you think this will easily be approved by members of the House?
Una-una, it does involve pera. Unlike doon, kasi pag stimulus, puro trillion pinag-uusapan. Dito, halos 83 billion lang ang kailangan. Ang mas concentration po ng nitong BBM na to, o yung bagong Moody, or all special powers for the President that are essentially economic in character to prevent market abuse and in order to solve mga market rigidities, logistical rigidities. So I think there is, because it is a fine, how would you call it? It's a fine use of powers that are available within the Constitution, but they become special in the sense that it is being used to target inflation.
Yeah. Does this include, so the emergency powers, Kong Joey, to be clear, is part of the Bangon Bayan Muli.
Yes, Bagong Bayan Muli.
Stimulus package. So ito, emergency powers forms part of that BBM package. Ano po?
Yes.
But how, and does this also include, very important po kasi ito yung SRP controlling or adding even items or commodities that are deemed basic commodities?
Importante talaga yun kasi alam mo naman ang ating mga negosyante, pag may kakulangan, makita mo na lang inaabuso na po yung kakulangan. So kasi pag wala, ang bilis presyohan ng malataas. So kailangan meron tayo kumbaga sword of Damocles na may powers ang Presidente to immediately intervene in local markets.
Opo. And isn't part of the BBM package also the anti-hoarding?
Yes, anti-hoarding, anti-price gouging. So kung may lumampas ka, may dinidefine po doon. Dinidefine po namin very clearly doon kung ano meaning ng hoarding, ano meaning ng price gouging. So para po may mga kapag-intervene po yung mga i-delegate ng Presidente, I'm sure it would be DTI and LGUs para po they can run after ito pong mga abusero. Kasi lalong-lalo na sa panahon na ngayon na inflationary po talaga yung ating pong environment. At the same time, meron tayong supply side restrictions talaga arising from COVID, due to logistical networks, and of course, due to the high prices of certain inputs to our industries.
But would you say that we are currently facing an economic crisis?
Well, usually I would say that the crisis concentrates basically on two things: inflation and food. Yes, I would say we are in the not yet there, but why go there? So it is a preemptive use of powers to prevent a food price crisis and, of course, inflation.
Is it would you characterize it or describe it as a looming food crisis?
Well,
Sorry, looming
if you
economic
don't
crisis.
if you don't do anything, yes.
Okay. So let's talk about two very important issues as well: job generation and the poverty index. But again, we need to take a very short break. The Source will be right back. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our source today, Albay Representative Joey Salceda. Congressman Joey, let's talk about unemployment. That's at about 2.90 plus million Filipinos. Just tell us, in the short term, yun kasi siguro yung importante ngayon, in the short term, how can government generate more jobs?
Well, una-una, it's fortunate that yung mga structural reforms like PSA, RTLA, FIA, CREATE, plus the fact that for the past 5 years, we've been having 5% of GDP on infrastructure. If you combine both, I think andyan na po yung elements. So, kailangan po talaga jobs promotion. Pero ang kailangan po dyan is basically more infrastructure. We have to retain our infrastructure at 5.2% as the principal first defense. Because infrastructure tends to create more jobs and the multiplier is 3.7 times. So, kailangan din po dyan dahil wala tayong masyadong fiscal space, dahil malaki na utang, kailangan natin ng public-private partnership at saka siguro kailangan natin yung mga SMEs para mabuhay. We need a special procedure para po mabigyan sila ng new lease in life. I think through the SEC, basically yung mga ang SME kasi is below 100 million eh. Some of them were essentially naipit lang nung biglang bagsak ng demand at ngayon naman biglang taas ng presyo. So kailangan natin na ma-revive natin yan through a special insolvency proceedings for SMEs. There are a lot of them actually. So that they can restart, they can rejoin the mainstream of the economic activity and therefore create jobs. So I would say that number one really is infrastructure.
Yeah. Yung sinasabi natin, I spoke to Senator Franklin Drilon. We have the same sentiment as well, sir. Really looking into public-private partnerships and strengthening our MSMEs, of course, the driving force of our economy. One quick question, sir, because we have to go soon. Ito pong your thoughts on this build, because you had mentioned this, kailangan patuloy natin or accelerate even the infrastructure programs. Yun pong tatlong railway projects, because this was in the news recently, yung Bicol, Subic, Clark, and Mindanao
yung
Railway.
Bicol, automatic. Kailangan talaga yun. Una-una, pinakamura yun sa tatlo eh. 174 billion lang yun. It's probably the most cost efficient. And I've seen 17 status reports on that. I don't know whether anong nangyari dyan, nag-submit nung May si Secretary Dominguez, tapos 2 months hindi pinansin ng China. So ginosting tayo. So ngayon, talaga, it's a really case of how would you call that? Interstate ghosting. So, pero sa ngayon, na-realize naman yata ng mga Chinese. I think they're back on the table, basically. I expect that all these three will go back.
But just help me understand this. Was the interest rate supposedly at really 3%?
Yeah, because Japan is offering 0.1% of GDP, but
Opo.
pero there is an interest rate that could equalize both in terms of their foreign forex parity. So I think that thing can easily be solved. Yung kasi ang interest rate ngayon rising naman talaga globally, di ba? Yung I would say there are about 250 basis points higher na, di ba? So yung 3% ngayon is now cheap. So I don't think that would be a very thorny issue in this case.
That's not an issue for you right now.
And
If
that's
it's still
no
at
more.
3%,
Given the
huh?
fact, wag lang nilang taasan yung 3. I think abante
You're
na
okay
tayo.
with that? Okay. Albay Representative Joey Salceda, sir, thank you so much for your time.
Maraming salamat, Pinky. Very sharp as usual.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.